Verified Carrier here with your host, Andrey Drotenko. I am here with Anne Reinke of the TIA, who is the president. So, Anne, I just want to give you a little moment here to introduce yourself and then, what you do. I'd love to hear about how you also came to the role that you're at, the kind of experience that you bring.
Sure.
If you could just tell me a little more about yourself.
Yes, and I'm broadcasting live from Marrakesh, as you can tell from my background. So forgive me if you hear the sounds from the outside. I'm joking, of course. Anne Reinke, President and CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. I'm sure your listeners all know who we are, but to the extent they don't, we represent the third-party logistics industry. So we have 2,000 members ish, give or take. The vast majority of them are brokers, and then there are associate members who provide services to those broker members. We have everybody from the mom and pop who opened the door last week to the largest companies that have been in business for years. We're a 46-year-old organization now. I have been here for almost 4 years. I came directly from the U.S. Department of Transportation, where I had a policy role and a governmental affairs role. And prior to that, I worked at the railroad, CSX, for 16 years, if you can believe that. And so I've been steeped in transportation for all of my career. I am a lawyer, but, we forget about that, forget about being a lawyer. Most lawyers don't want to be lawyers, or if they are, they're, doing something else besides also being a lawyer. And I'm a Washington, D.C. native. So that means I was a Redskins fan. I don't know if I'm a Commanders fan. I don't know how to rate the draft yet. We'll find out, right? It's always this year is going to be the year we go to the Super Bowl. So this is it.
If you're a fan and that's not what you're thinking, you got to reevaluate the situation. Great to hear that. Sounds like your career is quote unquote always on the move.
I love it.
Sorry, I have twin girls, so I'm a
dad jokes.
Full-fledged dad and dad jokes. Yeah, I've been doing them my whole life, but now it actually makes sense because I do them. Glad to hear about your experience in the industry. But we do know the industry that we're in is not having, it's not its heyday right now. Let's just say that,
right.
Putting it lightly. So there's a lot going on. We work Verified Carrier with both the carriers. We work with the factoring companies, insurance companies, with the brokers, and it is a difficult moment. So I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about your thoughts about kind of what's happening, where it came from, like what led to this point that we're at, and then what are your thoughts for Q3, Q4 of 2024, or might be 2025 before things really start looking up.
Yeah. So what I hear most from our members is they're concerned about the economy and they're concerned about fraud. And we can talk about both. I would say the economy, let's talk about that because that's really top of mind. During the heyday, I hate to say it, but the late 2020, all of 2021, the heyday of the freight market, the broker was so high in demand and there was so much freight volumes that there was supply chain dysfunction, which the broker could try to fix. So we had so much business coming at us that attracted new entrants into our space. And between 2019 and 2022, approximately about 4,000 new brokers got an MC number through the FMCSA to become an authorized property transportation broker. So when you think about the marketplace now, where there is less freight volume, the supply chain dysfunction has eased, there is still a need for a broker, but is there a need for 4,000 additional brokers? Probably not. So there's just not enough demand in the marketplace. And why is that? Because people are getting back to their lives. They're traveling now. They're getting their hair cut. They're doing, using up services that they weren't able to do during the pandemic, where they could only spend their cash on goods. So that's why there was so much freight volume. Since 2022, we've seen now a reduction back down, not to 2019 numbers yet, but a reduction in the number of brokers, people leaving the space, brokers leaving the space because they can't make it work. Either they got overexpanded during the pandemic, or they haven't ever been through business cycles, so they don't know what to expect from a down market. The members that we've had for years and years and years know how to ride the market, the ups and the downs, but there are plenty who didn't because they just started during the peak of the market, peaks that we've never seen before. And similarly, the carriers had a similar experience, as you know. More and more carriers joined the marketplace because they were in such high demand. Capacity was so scarce. When we look forecast to 2024, 2025, you know, I am no prognosticator. If I were, I would be a billionaire. But I will say this, from all that I've read and all that I've heard, people have optimism that this is going to ease itself back. Capacity is reducing, both carriers and brokers. And so that means that the marketplace is a little tighter. And so that means that there's kind of more consistency, potential for not rock bottom rates, et cetera, et cetera. And most people think that's going to happen by the end of 2024 into 2025.
Okay. And then, you know, that's the economic piece, but
Yeah.
on the fraud piece, it just seems like with COVID, I know historically, there's always been some sort of issues. I was just recently at the Broker Carrier Summit with some other colleagues in our space of, you know, identity vetting, but then also some representation from factoring companies. And, you know, for them, they said, you know, before this COVID and all this happened, it used to be just somebody tries to change a date and get paid faster, or tries to inflate a little bit of the numbers there to get a little bit more from an invoice. Whereas now, I mean, you just have completely fraudulent invoices in the thousands to hundreds of thousands that they have to look out for. So, you know, that's just one little tiny part of a huger, you know, more broad issue. So, kind of what's your thoughts on that and what's driving it? You know, I hear lots of different things of, you know, outsourcing and people who learn more of the industry and learn how to exploit the weaknesses in our systems. And kind of what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think just as the industry grew during the pandemic and people became aware of what brokers did and how they could sort of figure out and navigate the dysfunction, that means that we drew a lot of attention to our industry that previously wasn't there, coupled with the digitization of freight, meaning it was, you know, your run-of-the-mill fraud back in the day was, to your point, just changing the digit or figuring out a way to steal, you know, a load out of opportunity because you see it at a truck stop. Now they're actually professional criminals who have been attracted to our industry because the amount of money that's going through it and the amount that they can make off of stolen freight or phishing or spoofing or stolen identities. And so that's what's changed. I think the fact that the technology piece is both an ally and also a weakness is not lost on anybody. I mean, technology is the solution, but it also has caused the problem in a sense, or caused the problem to become bigger in a sense, because everything is online. For us, what also has made it challenging is that the oversight and enforcement of it, federal partners, hasn't been there. We are a regulated industry, as you know. Our regulator, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is in charge of making sure registrations are legitimate and people comply with the rules that are based around what you have to show for registering. And they are not actually enforcing their own rules. And unfortunately, their registration system is ancient, dated code, et cetera, et cetera. They are trying to revamp it and make it more up to date. But what that means for now is it can be exploited by those people who are seeking to do bad things. So all of this kind of soup where you don't really have great enforcement and you have a lot of people attracted to the industry, and we're in a period now where there's more desperation for those who are innocent. They will take potentially negative loads or loads that don't pay them as much with the hope that they get business, and they tend to be, you know, they could be fraudulent. I think all of that together has made it such a big problem.
Yeah. And I could see that. And, you know, again, I'm hearing just between fictitious pickups and strategic cargo theft, and like you said, it used to be just opportunity or breaking into a warehouse. You don't even have to do that anymore, because you'll just pretend to be a carrier, turn around, double broker it, redirect it, send it off to some warehouse. So everyone thinks they're just doing normal work, except for the few criminals involved. Everyone else is, they might even pay the carrier. So the way to get away with it is just pay the carriers. If you could steal a $200,000, load, and just pay somebody $3,000 or $1,500 to do just half the work and get it transloaded somewhere, that person thinks they're getting a real BOL. As far as they can tell,
No, that's
everything
right.
is totally normal. So it's gotten to a point where it's getting out of hand. And you did mention, on the federal side, there's stuff that's supposed to be happening. There's some plans for things that might, start happening. What I've heard about from different experts is, okay, the FMCSA did at least start forcing users to use login.gov. So that's a start. Because you have people who will approach somebody who's leaving the industry and offer to buy an MC. They want that seasoned MC that went through a bunch of brokerages and has continuous business, and they're seasoned and they're trusted. But then they have this other hurdle. So I think it's Scott Cornell that mentioned, now they'll just give another $3,000, $5,000 and just buy the email off of somebody and the phone number off of somebody. Now they could get these codes. So they could, in theory, quote unquote, legitimately change these details. And so no idea why the confetti just happened right there.
I think we're celebrating something.
Maybe as the quotation marks are a trigger. So it's just, the need for the technology to be able to, we're lagging behind as an industry. We have to admit that the criminals have gotten so sophisticated, and they know all these different things to do and how to change domain names. Now getting access to the DOT credentials, they would go fishing for the DOT PIN. I guess, are there any examples from, anyone that you've heard of in the last year or two, any examples of fraud that, where somebody has exploited the system or the FMCSA or, the laxity in being able to set up business and then kind of go on a spree?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are too many examples. And in fact, we have a fraud task force. We meet bi-weekly, and our task force, the last part of it is people sharing stories of things that have happened to them. And so unfortunately, I have a lot of stories, but what we have heard is basically a few things. One is this is infamous. There's this address in Wyoming that has 260 MC numbers assigned to it. And if and there's, some people know, some people don't, the FMCSA requires carriers to have a physical place of business, not a PO box, but this is a PO box. Now, some people say, well, they could be using it as a way to get better tax consequences. This is a registered agent in the state of Wyoming, and they want to register the business in the state of Wyoming. However, it still is a PO box, and it still has 260 MC numbers assigned to it. So what does that tell you? It's not a legitimate business. That's what you would be led to believe. The other stories we're hearing, to your point about MC numbers for sale, is Facebook Marketplace literally has, we want to buy MC numbers. This is on Facebook. I mean, it's too easy. And what people have found is that they have been hacked and their credentials get stolen and there are any number of ways that happens. And they can either have those credentials stolen and then used on the FMCSA site or on one of the load boards or what have you. And then at that point, they're just sort of like waiting for their reputation be ruined, because they have no way to figure out who did it, how they do it, et cetera, without hiring expensive help to figure it out for them.
Yeah. And then I guess, do you have any hopes for the government stepping in to do something about it realistically? Obviously for us, Verified Carrier, the idea is born out of real problems, both on asset and brokerage, and seeing this fraud, feeling it as a business. And then it kind of forced, our team was born out of just logistics guys moving into into tech because of what was happening. We're not like tech guys that are like, oh, hey, here's a neat idea that we're going to bring to the market is just literally like, hey,
Yeah.
why does this not exist? Why are people just getting MC numbers just like that? Why is nobody checking the
Mhm.
addresses? How is it that we can have so many businesses operating out of the same space? So there's a lot of things that we look for, and we'll show these affiliations. And Wyoming is one, but you go to Chicago, you go to several cities in California where you'll get company after company after company listed at the same
Yeah.
address. And so, we want to leverage technology to be able to show that. Um, Fortunately, unfortunately, depending which side you're looking at it from, the private sector is there to kind of fill these gaps, but you would expect that the government would have already done it because they have all the
Yeah.
same technology and more to be able to combat these issues. I mean, I guess my take on it is, there's the elasticity that is important to be able to start companies and close them down. I was just talking to a colleague from Europe, and he was just saying how, like, yeah, it's so expensive to do something over there, and it takes so long to start something up and close it down, and you got to pay all these employees and all this stuff. And we have a different setup here, for better or worse.
Right.
It's not a
For
political
better.
discussion. It's just it is much easier for the market to adjust to whatever's happening, supply and
Sure.
demand. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I would say this. I think the government is waking up slowly but surely. It's very slow. I would say some states, their enforcement arms are more active than others. Certainly the state of California has to be active since so much of the fraud is generated in the state of California, unfortunately. uh, FMCSA is aware of the problem. I do think they're trying to modernize their tech systems, which they need to. There are more things that they can do. You know, we can be hopeful, but that doesn't mean that we're sort of resting on our laurels and waiting, because we can't wait either. We have worked with two members of Congress to sponsor legislation that would basically give more of a stick to the FMCSA than they think that they have as it relates to prosecuting fraud. And we have put together, and we are in the process of putting together, a data collection report that can really try to aggregate how much of a cost this is to our members and to consumers in terms of mitigating, preventing, how much time spent, where the hotspots are, et cetera. And that from us is going to be sort of like our mission statement. Like, you guys, this is, I'm crying from the tops of the hills. We have to do something. This is not just a civil issue between, a carrier and a broker. This is actually a crime that's being committed to the hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially much more than that.
I guess that's the wild thing. I think it was Gary Thomas from the Kentucky State Police that mentioned it, or Stephen Spurlock. It was one of the two. I'm at a cargo theft summit, and they're talking about somebody takes, whatever it was, $200,000 load. They're holding a hostage and said, give us 40,000 or 60,000 or whatever it was, and we'll deliver it. And people want to call things in like that, but the way that the laws are written is, no, that's just a dispute over the payment, right? Whether it's $5,000 to deliver it or 60,000, now you're just haggling. So there's technically no crime. The word double brokering technically doesn't exist. There's unauthorized
Yeah.
rebrokering of freight, which is in a guideline. I don't know if it's in the actual the federal regulation. So it feels like more needs to be done to actually criminalize certain things, because we did it with cars. So you can steal or hold hostage or whatever you want to call it, $100,000 load, but if you touch a $3,000 Honda Civic, that's grand theft auto, right? So that's
Yeah, that's a great
that's
point.
so
That's a
wild.
great point. Yeah,
So
that's a great point.
I guess, yeah, with verified carrier, I think, we had a discussion before, and you've seen a little bit of what we
Yeah.
do. We've been at different festivals, went to Freight Waves. We demoed how we approach the situation. There's a lot of people coming, trying to take FMCSA data and maybe some additional pieces and trying to do their AI twist to it, or, give you a nice UI UX. Our whole thing is we want to actually go to each carrier and get information from the carrier and put it through a sift of multiple third parties to be able to turn around and say, hey, this is legit. This is a real person behind a real company at a real address. and they'll tie different pieces in there, and we'll be able to tell you how many vehicles they actually have, what kind of vehicles they have. If they have a Sprinter van, that's awesome. You can do parcel deliveries, intercity, maybe throw a couple of pallets in there, but those people shouldn't be turning around and booking 53-foot van or reefer freight. So,
well, that's exactly right. I mean, having that your capability, and I want to know a little bit more, but I mean, having a capability where you can tell, all right, if they've signed up to carry X thousand loads per week and they have a Sprinter van, well, that seems like that would be an indication that they're not able to do what they say they can do.
yeah. And well, the thing too is, as you're probably well aware, you have these DOT inspections, which is probably the most reliable, best data that you can get from the FMCSA in my eyes. Real police officer or DOT, state police, depending on the state, there's a timestamp. They actually record the VINs of the vehicles. And that was set up to prevent crashes by making sure equipment is safe and that the drivers are driving within their logbook hours, as per regulation. But now brokers turned around and they use that as a confirmation of real equipment ownership. But you can own equipment or you could just rent equipment. So it's just, another thing that we do is we leverage other information, whether it's bypass or fleet tracking, to show that someone actually has equipment and that this equipment in the last 30 days has actually moved across the country. Because especially the owner ops, they get hurt by, if they're using a bypass clean truck, they're friendly, they went through a CSV blitz, they could go for months and months and months without an inspection. And then when they call people up, they're told, hey, you haven't been inspected 9 months, 14 months, you're a double broker, you don't own any trucks, I'm not going to give you a load. And so, we pride ourselves on being able to dig a little bit further. We give a voice to the carrier when there are red flags, because like I said, we do 8 points of verification. So we want to see who this person is. We want to see a driver's license. We want to see a face ID. We want them to link up. It's like a bill pay. We don't see the details. All the financial information is with the third party, but we can see who owns the account and where they're based out of. So we want to make sure that the Secretary of State aligns with the FMCSA data, aligns with the insurance information, so that we can close this identity loop and turn around. And, if you get the check mark, it's like TSA pre-check. Once you do it once, whichever brokerage you go to, or you switch factoring companies or whatever it is, everybody knows you went through this, more in-depth verification process. And so it's a badge of honor that you could wear. And it's, ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So we could do all this great stuff and tracking and calling and sending helicopters to, try to go get a trailer, whatever it is. If you just don't let those people pretend to be carriers and don't turn around and they don't double broker it or set up, all this other shady stuff that can happen after they get their hands on their freight. That's the trick. To get your hands on freight, you have to pretend to be a carrier. We have no way to know who's a real carrier or not. And that's the wildest piece. So I just kind of want to see with, between verified carrier and maybe some of these other platforms that you're seeing, are we doing enough? Is there more that can be done? Just to kind of close out here, like what's your take on the current landscape? And then, what do you hope for the industry moving forward to be able to, for me, the goal, I'll just say flat out, get rid of these guys. All the millions, and it's hundreds of millions, 700 to 800 in double brokering, and the cargo thefts in the billions. But if we could just get rid of these guys, the capacity, supply, demand, they'll adjust, but there's just so much money being siphoned out of the industry and out of the country that should have never been siphoned out to begin with. It's not value added. It's just complete theft.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think what changes it is if it makes it too sticky and too challenging for these criminals to profit. And right now it's too easy for them. We're making it harder. Companies like yours, companies, all these various platforms that have come up to assist. I mean, and we're all small businesses, really. Most of the carriers are small businesses. Most of the brokers are small businesses. They're here to help these small businesses. Until we make it so impenetrable, we're going to be, unfortunately, victimized more than we would want to be. And so I think what we can do is continue to innovate technology, continue to push the button of the government to try to get them to act, make sure that it's embarrass them into it if we have to. Work with our federal enforcement agencies to make them understand sort of the scope of the issue. This is an interesting side detail I heard. There are all these kinds of associations in DC. We're like association heaven in here. And so one of them, the Retail Industrial Leaders Association, retail theft, obviously huge problem. We all know about retail theft. I think our theft is kind of getting to be as well known as retail theft, but everybody knows retail theft. They took video that was taken directly from, pharmacies and stores, et cetera, of smash and grabs. They sat down with state's attorney general and said, this is what we are up against. And that made the state attorneys general wake up a little bit. Now, we don't have necessarily smash and grab videos that we can show, but we sure do have text chains from fraudulent entities. We sure do have phone calls from fraudulent entities. Let's embarrass our enforcement agencies or provide them help to the extent we can to start cracking down on them. And so I do think that there's just the patience has worn thin, and people are willing to do whatever it takes to try to get some better enforcement and some better assistance out there.
Okay. Well, I guess, we can only hope and vote in the right direction to put things in place that are competent to make, changes to legislation. I know that's a slow process. So I guess I'm just glad to hear that there are people talking about it, trying to do something about it. There are people creating platforms, and Verified Carrier is one of these that want to tackle this problem. So, at least that's happening. And just, Anne, really appreciate your time too, coming on here, sharing your thoughts, your experience. Really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Marrakesh.
Yeah, in Marrakesh, I'm going to go ride a donkey. No, a camel, not a donkey.
It's beautiful. The Western Sahara is an incredible place. Sunsets are out of this world.
See you in a couple of weeks.
All right, Anne. Thanks again. You take care.
Thank you.